I also was working on something. I was looking at all past agendas and minutes and making sure they were like organized and stuff in each folder, and I would love to continue working on that because I did not finish.
Thank you. So now we'll go into more specific questions regarding the position itself. We'll start with the secretary. Okay, so how would you make sure that the minutes, reports, and documents reflect what actually happened during the meetings?
So the minutes, I usually, last year I just like wrote shorthand minutes, but also media records it, so I could always look back on that to make sure it reflects everything. And also for reports, also look back on media, but I could make sure to reach out to the person that did the report and make sure it's on the minutes.
Moving on to the treasurer. What strategies would you use to prevent overspending or underutilization of funds?
Overspending is generally pretty straightforward. Each organization, each club has a certain amount of money that they have access to for each year. They can often request more money, but really there's only so much money that we have. So I think keeping overspending to a minimum is generally pretty easy. Last year as treasurer, I believe we were in a deficit compared to what we budgeted for. We actually spent less. There were a number of reasons for this. Part of this was because the year got started so late with regards to the student government administration. The executive election, the officers elected in the spring of, it would have been 2024, did not remain in their positions, so we had to restart sort of fresh in the fall. Beyond that, I think it would really just be ensuring that all the organizations are doing what they're expected to do. They're controlled by people in stipended positions, and we should be holding those people accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is directed at the secretary. How will you ensure our governing documents, including policies and procedures, financial policy, stay concise in terms of fonts, structure, and etc., especially when you're no longer in the position, so that it has that continuity?
Well, to make sure it continues being like that, there could be like, at the end of the year, we always had a transition document, and you could also put it in the transition document of like what you did in the past year, but also like what notes you did, and make sure it stays consistent. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving back to the questions for our treasurer. How would you ensure responsible budgeting within SGU when it comes to what to spend money on and what not to, when it comes to initiatives and perhaps events?
That's a very good question. We're using students' money at the end of the day, and it's always important to recognize that fact. The helpful thing, most of our budget goes to our student organizations, so that would be our events board, media, esports, and the club funding board, and they've already had what they can spend their money on budgeted out. It's put into different categories, and they're really only supposed to be spending things from those categories for those categories. Past that, it's just ensuring that every purchase makes sense, right? We don't want to be spending $1,000 on something that really only affects a handful of students. We would much rather spend the same amount on something that will affect dozens of students and really give a positive impact to all of the students who fall under the student government. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. As per usual, at the end of the debates, we let guests who may have potential questions for our candidates. So if anybody would have questions, please come forward.
I have a question for the potential treasurer candidate. How would you make sure that the org's money is properly spent, as well as next year when you're working on their budget, that they know how their budget's going to be moved around and how their funds can stay the same and not taken away?
Well, the good news is that there's a budget committee, right? It's an open committee that generally meets weekly. Organizational representatives are usually invited to this committee. They are expected to show up when they are invited, and even if they don't during our Senate meetings when we actually pass the budget, there should always be an organization representative in the room when the budget is being discussed and eventually voted on. Usually this takes weeks, right? It's a long process. We're creating a $500,000 budget for an entire fiscal year, and really the hope is that the orgs are being an active and vocal participant in this process. Thank you.
So this is to the secretary. How do you plan on working with both budget committee and policy committee to make sure that the documents that they're working with is consistent so they can make proper changes to the documents while running on the most up-to-date documents, since they change usually week by week with all the bills and things that get put through?
Well, I could work with the treasurer and chair of policy committee, and I could also go to each committee and make sure when the bill is on the table that everything is correct. That answers your question.
So I also have a question, not as your host, but as the SGU president. So there will be times when I, as your president, will make calls that require everyone's alignment for the sake of progress. How would you handle a situation where you personally disagree with my decision? It's to both of you.
Well, I could ask you if I could say that I disagree with you, and we can come up with a compromise or something that makes so you can see my view on the situation, and then we can go from there, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that you really learn over time, especially when you're working under another individual who is really your supervisor. I've had many situations where I've disagreed with actions taken by other people within student government. I believe that we've pretty much always been able to come to a civil resolution, right? Because the important thing is that everyone's had their voices heard, and at the end of the day, the person in charge is the person making the decision, and the hope is always just that the person in charge who's making the decision is listening to all of those voices in the room and taking them into consideration when they make their decisions. Thanks for the question.
All right, thank you for the responses. If there are any other guest questions? Seeing none. Oh, we have one more.
How do you plan on working with our current new director of PR, as this year we were trying to make a big push for general things to be more public? How do you plan on, through your position, making things more public and generally letting the student body know more of what's going on in SGU?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest challenges that consistently student government faces is the lack of involvement and lack of awareness from amongst the general student population. Something that I floated as an idea last year that I am fairly passionate about, it would take some work to get it done in a way that's safe for everybody involved, but I think we can absolutely be a lot more transparent about where our money is going. That's my primary concern as the treasurer. I think generally speaking, if an organization is purchasing something, provided there's not confidential information in there, or it's not for some event that's, it's a surprise, or they're trying to keep something secret for the purposes of whatever they're organizing, I think that purchase request should be publicly accessible to any student on campus, because at the end of the day, it's their dollars that are being spent. It's a challenging, it's a pretty big task, right? There's a lot of things that will go into it, especially since sometimes within our purchase requests, we're handling pretty confidential information. There's everything from student information, such as student names and addresses when we're doing our stipend checks, to I've even seen social security numbers show up because Web will have W-2s from performers, or clubs will when they bring in independent contractors. And obviously that information needs to be secured. So there's a lot, it's something we're going to have to be very careful about, but I hope if I get this position, that's something I can achieve, because I think everything should be accountable. Every dollar should be able to be accounted for, because at the end of the day, it's the students' money that we're spending. Thank you.
So I think you could work with the director of PR, and also the committee meetings are also public, so we can promote that more with the director of PR, and that's really it.
Thank you. Any further question from our guests? From my understanding, our SGU advisor and office manager is in the audience right now, and the treasurer and the secretary will be working hand in hand with them. So, if they had any questions for our candidates today. No questions. Thank you. All right. Seeing that. More question.
Mine is for the secretary. So recently we just passed a bill called editorial amendments. So I'd like to know like how you plan on working on that to make the process very clear. I mean, I know the bill does state a process, but how would you personally, I'd say, want to work on that to make sure that everybody, Senate, the general student body are aware of the changes that are going on? Thank you.
Well, if there was something like edited and I didn't know, I could also ask the chair of policy committee, but also on the agenda there is like approval of it, so that could also be cleared of that, if that was what you're asking. Not really sure.
Thank you. Any further questions from our guests? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you guys for coming here today, and I wish you both best of luck within the election. Thank you.